Michelle Tesoro is the editor of The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. I'm at Noble of Gold Derby, here to ask you, Michelle, what was your biggest move in the edit room for Queen's Gambit?
The biggest move in the edit room. I would have to say for the show, since I did cut all of the episodes, one of our biggest moves that I think made a huge difference was splitting up 3 episodes into 4. So I think, yes, we had the first 2, I want to say, well, the first 3 episodes were very long, and they had so much story that was really important to relating to the character and understanding where she was going. Plus, you know, everybody fell in love with this character of Alma, and we didn't want to like cut any of that out. So instead of trying to whittle down what was scripted into 1-hour pieces, we decided to break those episodes up. So I think that was actually the biggest move.
Yeah. What was sort of the most important thing for you to consider as you were sort of cutting this show?
I think obviously the biggest thing that we were thinking about and the thesis that Scott wanted all of us, all department heads, to think of while we were doing our part was that the story is about the cost of genius. So that colored everything that we did in terms of how we cut things, what the point of view was. And for me, that means, you know, what was Beth's internal struggles. So I think if we kept all of the scenes with that aspect in mind, I think it made it more interesting than trying to kind of make us understand what the chess is, because ultimately that's not what's important. What's important is understanding what it means to her.
Yeah. And I think like an interesting thing is like, you know, you're sort of the big theme of the show is this cost of genius, and you're working on that while trying to do your absolute best in the edit room. Like, what was sort of, I guess, like the cost of like sort of giving so much of yourself to this edit?
That's a really good question, because it was such a huge time commitment on my end. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, and Norm, when I work with Scott, and I did this when we worked together on Godless, is I moved to New York for a year, whereas where Scott lives. And obviously in the last year, over the time when we were doing Queen's Gambit from the summer of 2019 through the summer of 2020, well, there was a kind of a little bit of a personal cost there in being completely locked in an apartment for most of post. And I don't know, it was funny when we moved from cutting in the cutting room, which was a great cutting room. Like, I had done all this work to like set up the projector and like a nice comfy cutting room for Scott and I to work together in. And I was glad to have cut half the, you know, I was glad to have assembled everything in that room to see it on a really huge screen. Like, I had like a 12-foot screen to work off of. So when I was doing like the quad, you know, the split screens and everything, like you could really see a lot of the detail. But once I moved into my apartment, which is basically a studio in Chelsea, I realized, I was like, oh, well, you know, it's not any different than when I was in the cutting room anyway. I would have just been within 4 walls. And it in fact gave me a lot more time to be creative. And yeah, it just gave me a lot more alone time with the material, which I think helped me come up with problem solving, puzzle solving things that Scott wanted me to. But yeah, I don't know if that's if that answers that.
You talked about just then the puzzle solving and problem solving you had to do on this show. Can you think of a particular moment or scene or thing you had to work on, which was a particular like sort of puzzle to have to sort of figure out and work out how to tell?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the first thing that came to mind um, was episode one. That was one that we didn't actually break up. We did have to whittle that one down. And we were still sort of figuring out, how much chess is too much chess. And there were certain sequences there that actually they had shot a whole game of Little Beth playing Mr. Scheibel. And after a while, like we had the sequence where she's learning how to play chess, and it ends with her finally playing white. And that scene actually used to play out in the whole match, where the music stopped and it was just them playing. And then he gives her the book of chess. And then after that, she meets Gans, and then she plays again with him. And I think we had cut out a lot of little scenes in between when she receives the book and when she meets Gans. And all of a sudden, because we had cut all that out, it seemed like there was just a ton of chess. It's like, okay, yeah, we're going to sit here again and watch this little girl beat another older guy at chess. So we had to decide like what felt what felt right. And to me, it always started with, okay, let's, I'm going to teach you, and end with you're astounding. So, and that needed to be one big sequence, which is, so we took that one scene where she played white for the first time and beat him, and folded that into the montage of her learning. So it begins with her learning and then ends with her beating him playing white and feeling like she's mastered it. So that was one puzzle that I felt like I had to solve. The other one that was obviously the restructure of the whole series. So, and that was a big deal because we were running pretty long, and we ended up, this third episode that didn't actually exist was, I can't remember, it was episode 3. And it starts with Cincinnati, which used to be in episode 2, but now began episode 3. And it ended with her driving away from towns in Vegas, which used to be the top of episode 3. So, to me, like that is like one of the most fun episodes because you really feel the relationship with her and Alma, and you can really focus on that.
Chess is a game where sometimes to win you need to sacrifice a piece. I imagine editing also is a game where you sometimes have to make some pretty tough sacrifices. What was the hardest scene or moment for you to cut from the Queen's Gambit?
Oh, that is really hard. Now I'm trying to remember what we sacrificed because, you kind of don't want to look back once you've cut them out. I think, I had to think about that. Oh my gosh. Now I'm trying to remember what we lifted. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right. You know what? I know. So in episode 1, I told you episode 1, the assembly started out as like an hour and 50 minutes. And it's a tight now when you look at it, it's about 64, or maybe it's even less. I can't remember. It's 57 maybe. So we took out a whole hour. And part of that was when we screened a long-ish episode, not 2 hours. We screened maybe about an hour and 10 or hour 15, something of that episode for friends and family and colleagues. And they all felt that the way that the episode should end was when she falls with the pills, which is how it ends now. Mm-hmm. But before that, she falls and we have a whole sequence of her being punished by Deerdorf. Deerdorf has, a strict talking to her and says that, and Beth, no more chess. And then you see just a sequence of her living life without chess. And she even like that's when she starts imagining everything on the ceiling way more. But because we had established a lot of that in episode 1 in terms of the ceiling chess, and we thought it would be better to jump ahead at the top of 2. And it was such a strong ending for her to fall and just pass out. Everyone, I think a handful of people across different friends who were not related recommended that, and that's what we did. So that was probably one of the biggest sacrifices, only because we thought it was really good and we hung on to it for quite a bit. And we love Christiane, who played Mrs. Deardorff, but it had to go.
Yeah. Okay, I won't make you have to relive too many other like things you have to cut, Michelle. So like, let's focus on now. What is the sort of scene or moment that you put in that you're the most sort of like fond of or proud of, or that you're like, oh, so glad we got that bit in there?
That is a really good question. Well, I think I'm really proud. You know, obviously, it's hard to talk about like split screens as being, but everybody loves a split screen sequence. And to me, you know, you don't want it to get too gimmicky, because to me, the heart of editing is the pace of the storytelling, which is often invisible. But I think the split screen, I'm really glad, because that ended up being a shoot day where they didn't have a lot of time. And when Scott initially shot that sequence, he didn't get everything that he wanted to get. So he had called me in a panic and said, oh God, you know, do what you can with it, and, you know, do the split screen, and here's music. And I did that. And what happened with that sequence is I ended up using a lot of the footage that we had in episode 1 as examples of elements that I think could fill the sequence. And later on, towards the end of the shoot, they were able to do some pickup shoots, and our B-cam operator, George, and I'm forgetting his last name. George is great.
George.
Ended up shooting these pieces of footage, which one of them was the overhead shot of the chessboard where the faces pop in and out. So he shot that with people's hands coming in and out, and then and just close-ups of the chessboard. And those were all things that we prescribed from the cutting room. So I was really glad that we were able to save that sequence and make it so popular.
Yeah. With editing the chess games and things like that, I'm not like I'm not a big chess guy. I don't play it very well, but was it important that you, like, it all had to make sense to someone who might be a bigger chess expert than me, who like could watch it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense how they're moving it and stuff? Because like they could film it like that, but then you have to cut it and make it fit a certain amount of time.
Yeah, well, I think you and I are on the same page with that. I'm not very good at chess. I think I've said this several times, but I think my knowledge of it coming into this was fairly basic. I knew how all the pieces moved. I knew the basics, but I didn't know how to really play chess. So I think from that vantage point, I was able to put myself in a normal viewer's place, and make it, if it was exciting to me, then I figured it was exciting to somebody else who didn't know. And in terms of the chess being something that could play for someone who does know chess, I think what took care of that was our chess consultants. You know, we had Bruce Pandolfini, who created all of the him and like 2 other consultants plus Gary Kasparov, you know, created all the sequences, all the chess sequences that that they played throughout the series. They created a whole chess Bible. So they knew as long as they shot it correctly, and because they were on sets and they could see, okay, does that look accurate in terms of how they're picking up the pieces and moving it, and what the moves are, that as long as they shot it correctly, then I knew like how to cut it. It was just a matter of, okay, it's already played out there in front of me, and I can just be like, okay, I'm really getting bored here. I don't really want to watch them do this. I want to see how he reacts or how she reacts. And that's more interesting to me and more informative.
Yeah. Boy, like oh man, whoever had the job of like keeping like continuity on set, making sure those pieces got reset in between retakes and things like that.
Oh
Boy.
yeah, there was a couple of times actually, even when they weren't playing. For example, in episode 1, when she goes down to steal the screwdriver
Mm.
in order to break in, there was, they had set up the table where there was the chess pieces, and I guess the white captured pieces were on the wrong side. And
Mm.
so I think we had to actually, we redid them in visual effects where they colored it differently, So there were things like continuity where we had to keep an eye. But I was actually really proud the first time I screened the cuts for Bruce Pandolfini, because I was like, okay, what's going on? And it's very little. He was very impressed. So I was like, oh my God, that felt
Oh,
so good.
oh, that's good. You did say that, like, obviously you worked on Godless, and this isn't your first show. What's something like new that you did here? Something that you'd never had to do before as an editor?
On this show,
Yeah.
I think, I'd never cut this much play of a game. I had done before, I had cut, horse racing, which I didn't understand at all. Playing poker is yet another game that's like, I think that's good. I don't know, but it seems very similar, but I think I haven't cut this amount of sports drama before. And, to keep it exciting every time and try to make it different every time was a challenge. But I think everybody tried. Everybody from every department was concerned about it, so that was good. But I think also just the flashbacks of it all. Like I hadn't cut that much flashback in the way that I did before. So that's sort of a new feel for me, is being able to intercut flashes in and that kind of thing was new.
Yeah. An editor gets to watch a show probably more than most. You have the privilege of having probably sat through each scene a lot of times. With that sort of privilege, what scene or moment in the show is one that you just never got sick of having to watch over and over again?
Funny enough, I love watching the speed chess, and both sequences of the speed chess are fun. I really try to cut those and in a way that they would just play out in front. Obviously there was a little bit of tweaking I did to make them seem a lot faster than they actually were, which was fun and tricky. But that is always so fun because it's just moving so fast, and I love the music there. Another sequence is the Paris sequence. I don't get sick of watching that over and it's cool. I do get pulled in. Like whenever someone's asking me, oh, can you pick a sequence that you want to show for an interview or whatever? And I'm like, it's so hard to pick, one. And number two, it's like I'm watching it and then all of a sudden I get lost. Like, oh, I wish I could show that whole 10-minute sequence, but nothing.
Yeah. Is there any like film or TV show that growing up that like really made you think you wanted to get into editing?
The first time I actually really started thinking, and it might have been earlier. It's sort of when I was a kid, I used to watch a lot of Tom and okay, this sounds stupid. A lot of Tom and Jerry and play it back and forth because I was like, how did it? And I really wanted to be an animator when I was a child. But I think the first time when I was a little bit older that I kind of understood the power of film editing and what that was as a concept was when I saw Reservoir Dogs. I remember I saw that at the Three Penny Cinema in Chicago and in the theater. So I was like, wow, why is that so violent? And I don't see the ear coming off. Like it's sort of this interesting thing that and the way that Sally Menke cut that wasn't like anything I had seen before.
Yeah. Tom and Jerry makes sense to me because I feel like slapstick comedy, like timing is very important. And editing has a lot of like saying the timing of like the beats and how long things
Yeah,
linger.
I love that, and I loved watching a lot of Looney Tunes, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
iconic things.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to end, Michelle, what is to you the most special thing about Queen's Gambit?
I think what's special is that um, we're with this young lady and that we relate to her, and with all of her faults and all of her triumphs. And I think that's in the end is what attracted people to the show.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for talking with us today. People watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to make your awards predictions, join the discussion in our forums, and watch other videos with awards contenders. And Michelle, all the best of luck with the Emmy Awards this year.
Thank you.